It's an absolute tragedy. Any human life is a human life.
This is Jasmine. It is, I don't know, the 8th evening of the January 8th, and this has been talked about by a lot of people, this video stuff here.
And of course, it's really sad. Everything about this is really sad. There is a woman who has since been identified as Renee Nicole Good, 37 years old, fatally shot by an ICE agent at approximately 10:25 local time in Minnesota. That is the most simplistic black and white version of what happened. And then the story gets a little confusing. It's a little conflicting. There are some very conflicting narratives and witness testimony taking place right now. We're going to dive into all of that. But first, I just want you to take a look at the video from a close-up angle.
No! No! Shame! Oh my God! What the fuck? What the
Get the out of our neighborhood!
So, I mean, she is clearly parked, obstructing them, and the officers approach her. They tell her to get out of her vehicle in a pretty intense fashion. They try to open the door to the vehicle. It's locked, obviously. She speeds off. She ends up striking one of the officers as well while she does so. A really bad situation with a lot of emotion, a lot of panic, a lot of things going through your brain, and split seconds to make a decision and react. And that was the end result.
And then, of course, what the driver does next. Let's play that video. Trying to leave there, one of the officers felt like they were forced to fire, and they do. We want to show another angle, a reverse angle of the same incident here. We're going to freeze it. This is that same angle here. And what does this show us, Tom?
Well, this appears to show an officer right in front of the vehicle. That, and between the way that the vehicle was moving and the timeline of that, how was the officer responding in that split second going to be critical for investigators.
Finally, one more piece of evidence we want to talk about here, and it is the bullet hole in the front of the windshield. What will this tell investigators?
Well, you look at this, you look at ballistics, you look at witness statements, you look at other video, all going to be part of this investigation.
JD Vance did just finish a press briefing about this incident. We will play clips from that. But the story here starts to get a little conflicting about who this woman was, what she was doing, what was going on. And there's a lot of things that don't.
Yeah. Well,
Don't actually make a whole lot of sense about this. But first and foremost, Homeland Security had posted this, that today, in an act of domestic terrorism, an anti-ICE rioter weaponized her vehicle against law enforcement. Our officer relied on his training and saved his own life, as well as the lives of his fellow officers. Sanctuary politicians have created an environment that encourages rampant assaults on law enforcement. POTUS, Trump, and Secretary Kristi Noem will always have the backs of law enforcement. President Donald Trump posted.
yeah, I say again, if the police tell you to do something, do it. Don't try to be a vigilante.
That he just watched the clip of the event, which took place in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's a horrible thing to watch. The woman screaming was obviously a professional agitator, and the woman driving the car was very disorderly, obstructing and resisting, who then violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer, who seems to have shot her in self-defense. Based on the attached clip, it is hard to believe that he is alive, but is now recovering in hospital. The situation is being studied in its entirety, but the reason these incidents are happening is because the radical left is threatening, assaulting, and targeting our law enforcement officers and ICE agents on a daily basis. They are just trying to do the job of making America safe. We need to stand by and protect our law enforcement officers from this radical left movement of violence and hate. So, with that information and statements made by the government, you would assume that this woman was a regular ICE rioter, protester, however you want to call it, and that she was parking her vehicle in front of them deliberately to antagonize them, provoke them, and things got incredibly out of hand and ended in an absolute tragedy. However, if you go and take a look at what mainstream media is writing about this, Good's ex-husband, who asked not to be named out of concern for the safety of their children, told the Associated Press that she had just dropped her 6-year-old son off at school and was driving home with her current partner when they encountered a group of ICE agents on a snowy street in Minneapolis, where they had moved last year from Kansas City. He went on to say that she was not an activist of any kind and that he had never known her to participate in a protest of any kind either. He described her as a devoted Christian who took part in youth mission trips to Northern Ireland when she was younger. She loved to sing, participate in chorus in high school, and study vocal performance in college. Additionally, he claims that she had been a stay-at-home mom in recent years, but had recently worked as a dental assistant and at a credit union. She also hosted a podcast with her second husband, who unfortunately passed away at the age of 36 back in 2023. Renee's Instagram profile, she has her pronouns in there. She has a flag in there. Fair enough. She is married to a woman now. We will get to that in a moment. But she describes herself as a poet, a writer, wife, mom, and a shitty guitar strummer from Colorado, experiencing Minneapolis.
There's a part of me that feels very, very sad for this woman, not just because she lost her life, but because I think she is a victim of left-wing ideology. What young mother shows up and decides they're going to throw their car in front of ICE officers who are enforcing legitimate law? You've got to be a little brainwashed to get to that point to where you're willing not just to protest, that's fine, not peacefully protest, but throw your vehicle in front of legitimate law enforcement officers and drive your car into them. To get to that point, you have to be, I think, radicalized in a very, very sad way. I certainly wish that she hadn't got there. I know there's an ICE officer right now who very much wishes he was not put in the position where he had to fire a gun to defend his own life.
Renee Good is a mother of 3 with a son who is 6 years old. The press is saying that that boy is now an orphan. However, she was survived by her wife, Rebecca Good, who was also on scene. And even though they had just dropped off their son at school and were just casually driving home, her wife was actually outside of the vehicle and filming the whole situation. There's video footage of that as well, where her wife, Rebecca, is saying that they just moved there and she doesn't know anybody's phone numbers and just totally in distraught, obviously, very traumatized from what she just witnessed. But it gets the story gets weird here. It does.
They clearly wanted her out of there because she was the main car leading the protest, is my understanding. I talked to another guy who was driving behind her, but she was very successful in blocking traffic. She was doing what she was set out to do, and so they wanted to get her the hell out of there. Yeah.
So it looked like she was impeding ICE vehicles.
Definitely, yeah. Okay. That was her goal.
Now, that obviously directly contradicts what her first ex-husband was saying about her, where he said that she's not involved in that at all. She's a good Christian woman, not involved in activism. That also contradicts what her family is saying about her. Her mother and father have both spoken out, saying that she hadn't previously shown any signs at all of activism. Although, according to Yahoo News, at the very least, after U.S. President Donald Trump won the election in November of 2024, Good and her partner apparently moved to Canada for a short period of time before returning to Minneapolis because they figured out how things really are here. A lot of people describing her as one of the kindest people they've ever known, extremely compassionate, taking care of people her whole life, loving, forgiving, affectionate. And all those things are likely completely true, right? Of course, all of those things are likely completely true. What is also completely true is that her wife, Rebecca, also said, quote, "I made her come down here. It's my fault."
I agree with you, Jonathan. I think there's some details we don't know yet, and we'll have to learn more about it. What strikes me is, first of all, it's extremely sad and unfortunate that someone died. I mean, the political fighting and disagreements aside, it's terrible. You don't want people to die in law enforcement situations or otherwise. But it strikes me that we are undergoing an epidemic of political vigilantism right now. Why are people showing up in vehicles, in convoys, not just in Minneapolis, but all over the country in an effort to obstruct
break that spell.
Lawful federal law enforcement activities? This is not an isolated incident. We have had hundreds of car rammings against ICE agents all over the country. According to DHS, this lady in this car today, along with other vehicles, had been tracking ICE agents around. Why are people believing that they can drive their car into a federal law enforcement situation, and that is an appropriate thing to do. I understand they don't like the fact that these agents are enforcing existing immigration law, but that's not how we change laws in this country. If you don't like a law, you talk to the politicians. You don't drive your car into the middle of a building or a law enforcement situation that's being occupied by the people who are simply there to enforce the law. If I don't like how much the IRS is charging me in taxes, I don't drive my car into the Treasury Department and try to run somebody over. I call my congressman. Political vigilantism is being encouraged by Democratic officials like the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan, who earlier this year told people to, quote, put your bodies on the line, and Tim Walz calling these guys Gestapo all year. What do you think happens when you radicalize a base of people about this?
Strike me.
Now, obviously, there is so much more in this developing story that will come out, especially with more and more witnesses who were on the ground when this happened. But
It's very uncomfortable. This is a very uncomfortable situation. Tragic. Loss of life because of radicalization, I guess.
at the end of the day, the official story that we're getting from the press is polar opposite to that of the government. Could both maybe exist at the same time? That's up for you to decide and discern, I suppose. I think not. I think it seems kind of odd to drop your son off at school and then be on your way home, and suddenly your wife says, "Hey, honey, I'm actually going to get out of the car now and walk the next couple of blocks home," and then for you to then park your vehicle at an angle obstructing ICE officers and their vehicle, and then your wife is filming the whole thing in front of it, like with a crowd of people who are yelling and spitting at them. And then for that to take place, that doesn't make any sense at all to me. So as far as I can see this, and of course, with all due respect to her family, this to me seems like somebody who, yes, was a very wonderful woman and probably still had plenty of those qualities, but who was radicalized by the left ideology.
Yep.
And who got involved in something that tragically ended her life.
Left-wing violence is a problem in this country, Jesse. We've said this time and time again. My dear friend Charlie Kirk was murdered by a left-wing radical. The President of the United States was almost killed a year and a half ago. And then again, a few months after that, we have a real crisis where there are far too many left-wing people who don't want to debate, who don't want to disagree, who don't want to try to persuade their fellow citizens. They want to try to kill their fellow citizens, and that's a real problem.
This being an intense moment that didn't need to exist in the first place, and having a woman in panic, under duress, whatever, not quite knowing exactly what to do, and one thing leading to another, and it ending in that tragedy is always sad. It's always sad. I don't care what side of the fence you are on. You are still a human. I don't care how much I oppose that side of the fence you are on. I pray that people wake up from that, because to sit here at this point in time and say, oh, well, she was a mother of 3. She was a really compassionate, kind woman, and you just took her. Yeah. Charlie Kirk was the father of 2. Yeah. He was a husband as well. Yeah. Erica Kirk is a mother of 2, a widow. And I recall the left chanting about it, cheering that on. They were so happy and thrilled. So be consistent in your values always, and be very mindful of the company that you keep, because that can dramatically change the outcome of your life. And always aim up. Anyway, here is what J.D. Vance had to say about this. He went off.
She's a very good coach, you know. She's a smart lady.
In his press conference today.
What you see is what you get in this case. You have a woman who is trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. Nobody debates that. You have a woman who aimed her car at a law enforcement officer and pressed on the accelerator. Nobody debates that. I can believe that her death is a tragedy, while also recognizing that it's a tragedy of her own making, and a tragedy of the far left who has marshaled an entire movement, a lunatic fringe, against our law enforcement officers. I think what is clearly happening here, and it's going to keep on happening unless the Democrats wake up and say, you know what, you don't have to agree with our immigration policies. You don't have to agree with what the president or the vice president believe about immigration enforcement. But why don't you take this to the ballot box? Why don't you vote? Why don't you organize? Instead, what some of them are doing is encouraging people to get violent with our law enforcement officials. It's disgraceful and it's got to stop.
As J.D. Vance goes on to explain here as well, there was more details that came out about the officer involved in this event that also was just a little bit more food for thought in terms of how serious that line of work is.
Somebody sent me a photo of a CNN headline about what happened in Minneapolis. And this is the headline. I'm just going to read it. Outrage after ICE officer kills U.S. citizen in Minneapolis. Well, that's one way to put it, and that is the way that many people in the corporate media have put this attack over the last 24 hours. And I say attack very, very intentionally, because this was an attack on federal law enforcement. This was an attack on law and order. This was an attack on the American people. The way that the media...
I see that. I can see that.
Media, by and large...
It reminds me of when they were attacking cars, Tesla cars. Same kind of ideology, same kind of mania.
Has reported this story has been an absolute disgrace, and it puts our law enforcement officers at risk every single day. What that headline leaves out is the fact that that very ICE officer nearly had his life ended, dragged by a car 6 months ago, 33 stitches in his leg. So you think maybe he's a little bit sensitive about somebody ramming him with an automobile? What that headline leaves out is that that woman was there to interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation in the United States of America. What that headline leaves out is that that woman is part of a broader left-wing network to attack, to dox, to assault, and to make it impossible for our ICE officers to do their job. If the media wants to tell the truth, they ought to tell the truth that a group of left-wing radicals have been working tirelessly, sometimes using domestic terror techniques to try to make it impossible for the President of the United States to do what the American people elected him to do, which is enforce our immigration laws.
It is just so evil. It's so evil, the way in which the media in particular operates. And you see it every time you scroll through social media, how like just deluded so many people are. They have no idea what is actually going on, what they're actually fighting for, or the fact that what they're fighting for is funded by some billionaire who seeks to benefit from a certain party being in power.
What is, I'm sorry guys, what's going on here? You guys are meant to report the truth. How have you let yourself become agents of propaganda of a radical fringe that's making it harder for us to enforce our laws? You just asked me a question that presumed that the reason why this woman died is because she was engaged in legitimate protest. She tried to run somebody over with her car, and the guy defended himself when that happened. Next question.
And all of these people, it's just the saddest thing in the world to watch them go down this hole in life, where they could be the most amazing people and they get caught up in something that gives them moral superiority, where they're a victim and they're fighting the oppressed. It makes you feel so powerful, but it completely clouds your judgment and your mind, and you don't even see reality anymore. And you have people screaming and shouting about all of these things that don't affect them, that half the time aren't even real, that are just these made up stories. For what and for whom? It's not for the people. It's for clicks so that big companies continue to make their revenue. And it's for governments who want to stay in power because they're filthy rich when they're in power. And it's so disturbing. But this journalist actually asked a really brilliant question here. So I want to close out this episode with this one.
Temperature. It seems like political violence is ratcheting up and riots could be around the corner. What steps does the administration have planned to try to unite America? Average people on both political sides are so tired of fighting with each other, and I think all the journalists in this room could agree with me that we don't want to be part of the problem. Do you have any words to unite America?
You know, I know you don't want to be a part of the problem, and I think that's true of a lot of you. I'm not sure it's true for everybody, because the reporting over this has been one of the biggest scandals I've ever seen in media. I've never seen a case so misrepresented and misreported when you have a guy who is defending himself and is now being treated as some sort of federal assassin by so many of the people in this room. First of all, let me say about crime. You mentioned violence. One of the things we're proudest about is that you saw violent crime over the last year drop by 20%. Why is that drop by 20%? Is it because we're attacking our law enforcement officers, or is it because we in the administration are empowering our law enforcement officers to enforce the law? I think that's one of the ways you take down the temperature, is you make people feel more secure and safe in their person and property. That's why we care so much about protecting our law enforcement, because it accrues to the benefit of the entire national community. I think that we can absolutely talk about the ways in which, you know, we can lower the temperature by discussing differences in a reasonable and rational way. Again, I'm happy to talk with any congressional Democrat or any of you about our immigration policy, about why I think it's necessary, about why I think it's in the best interest of the country, about why the President of the United States was elected to actually enforce the border for the first time in at least 4 years. So here's the problem. That's not the debate so many people are having. They are actively covering for people who are committing acts of violence against federal law enforcement. It is preposterous. The way to take down the temperature is to stop it. Have your debates about policy. Attack me. Attack the President of the United States. Don't attack our law enforcement officers. They are trying to do the job the American people demanded that they do. They are not policy actors. They are enforcing the law. They should be treated with a modicum of dignity and respect. And the fact that they're not is why incidents like yesterday happened.
I'm Jasmine Lane. Thank you so much for watching. Like, share, subscribe, comment your thoughts down below, and I will talk to you tomorrow.
She has a very good podcast. Okay, we gotta go. We gotta go. That's it. Stop streaming.
What really happened between the cross and the empty tomb? The three...
There we go. Stop streaming. That might be good. That might be good.
days that shook heaven, earth, and the depths of the dead. For nearly 2,000 years, Christians around the world have told the same familiar story. Jesus of Nazareth was crucified on Friday. He rose from the dead on Sunday. The story is repeated every Easter. It is preached, sung, and reenacted in churches across the globe. But between those 2 days, between the cross and the empty tomb, there is a stretch of time most people rarely examine. A single day, Saturday. A day with no miracles, no sermons, no crowds, no recorded words from Jesus. A day of silence. And yet, according to ancient Christian belief, early creeds, and the mystical visions that inspired Mel Gibson's upcoming film The Resurrection, that silent day may contain some of the most dramatic, unseen events in all of human history. Because while the world believed God was dead, something extraordinary was unfolding beyond human sight. It was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The sky was not yet dark, but the air felt unnaturally heavy, as if creation itself sensed that something irreversible was happening. On a barren hill called Golgotha, the place of the skull, a man hung dying on a Roman cross, Jesus of Nazareth. To Rome, he was another criminal. To the religious authorities, he was a threat. To his followers, he was the Messiah. His body was broken beyond recognition. His back had been torn open by scourging. His hands and feet were nailed to rough wood. Each breath was an act of agony. And yet, in his final moments, Jesus did not cry out in rage or despair. Instead, he spoke words of surrender. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. According to the Gospel of Luke, the moment those words were spoken, the world responded. The ground shook violently. Rocks split apart. Graves opened. Inside the temple in Jerusalem, a massive veil, separating the Holy of Holies from the people, was torn in two from top to bottom. This was no ordinary curtain. It was thick, heavy, and sacred. No human hands could have ripped it that way. The message was unmistakable. The barrier between God and humanity had been shattered. Mystics like Saint Catherine Emmerich, whose visions profoundly influenced Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, described this moment as more than a physical earthquake. In her accounts, it was a spiritual rupture. Priests fell to the floor in fear. The sense of divine order that had governed the temple for centuries suddenly collapsed. Even Pontius Pilate, seated miles away in his palace, reportedly felt a deep unease, as though an invisible judgment had passed through the city. At the foot of the cross stood a Roman centurion, hardened by years of violence. When he saw how Jesus died, not cursing, not begging, but forgiving, something broke through his armor. Truly, this was the Son of God. It was not a theological statement. It was a confession. As evening approached, two men emerged from the shadows, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. Both were members of the Jewish ruling council. Both had believed in Jesus secretly, afraid of losing their status. Now they stepped forward publicly. They asked Pilate for permission to take Jesus' body down from the cross. When the nails were removed, each metallic sound echoed through the silence like a drumbeat of grief. The body was lowered carefully, reverently. Nearby stood Mary, the mother of Jesus. She did not scream. She did not collapse. She stood, silent, composed, unshaken. Saint Catherine Emmerich describes Mary not as broken, but as immovable, like a pillar standing in the storm. Her grief was total, but so was her faith. The body of Jesus was washed. Dried blood was removed from his wounds. Fragrant oils, myrrh, spikenard, and sacred balms filled the air. This was not merely burial preparation. It was an act of devotion. He was wrapped in white linen and placed in a newly carved tomb, cut into limestone near an olive press. A massive stone was rolled across the entrance. To the authorities, that should have been the end of the story, but fear lingered. Rumors of resurrection had spread. To ensure nothing unexpected happened, Pilate ordered 16 Roman soldiers to guard the tomb. Elite, disciplined men trained to kill without hesitation. Torches burned through the night. Shifts rotated. The tomb was sealed. From the outside, everything appeared finished. But beneath the stone, beyond human control, something had already begun. Saturday passed without recorded miracles. No sermons, no healings, no divine signs in the sky. For the disciples, it was the longest day of their lives. They hid behind locked doors, terrified that the same fate awaited them. Hope had collapsed. Their Messiah was dead. Their dreams were buried. To the world, God appeared silent. But ancient Christian tradition insists that Saturday was not empty. It was hidden. While the body of Jesus lay motionless in the tomb, his spirit was not confined by stone or time. According to early Christian teaching, echoed in the Apostles' Creed, Jesus descended into hell. This phrase has often been misunderstood. In ancient Jewish belief, the realm of the dead was known as Sheol. It was not the hell of eternal punishment, but a shadowy place of waiting, a holding realm for souls who had died before redemption was complete. Even the righteous, Adam and Eve, Noah, Abraham, Moses, David, remained there, separated from the fullness of God's presence. Saint Catherine Emmerich describes Jesus' descent not as passive, but triumphant. He did not enter as a victim. He entered as a king. Light pierced the darkness. Not a gentle glow, but a radiant force that shattered centuries of silence. The righteous felt it instantly. Shame gave way to hope. Waiting gave way to fulfillment. Adam, burdened by the weight of humanity's fall, felt release for the first time. Abraham recognized the fulfillment of his faith. Moses no longer needed the law, because the law stood before him, alive. The dark forces that had fed on fear and death attempted to resist. They whispered lies, clung to shadows, and asserted ancient claims. But lies cannot survive in the presence of truth. Emmerich's visions emphasize something striking. There is no violent battle, no clash of weapons. Christ does not destroy the forces of darkness through force. He simply is, and that is enough. The darkness dissolves like fog under sunlight. The righteous awaken. Souls rise, not dragged, but drawn. Jesus leads them out in a procession that resembles an exodus, history itself being liberated from captivity. The gates of heaven, closed since the fall, open. This moment is rarely depicted in art or film, yet it may be one of the most consequential acts in all of salvation history. While the world mourned a dead Messiah, the Messiah was reclaiming creation from the inside out. It was still dark when the earth trembled again. 16 Roman soldiers stood guard at the tomb, unaware they were moments away from witnessing something no empire could explain. A light erupted from within the grave, not fire, not lightning, but something alive. Inside the tomb, the body of Jesus began to rise. According to Saint Catherine Emmerich, gravity had no authority here. The wounds that once bled now shone. The linen cloths fell away, intact, folded neatly, silent witnesses to the impossible. The stone rolled aside, not violently, but deliberately. Angels descended, their presence overwhelming. The soldiers collapsed, frozen by terror and awe. The most secure tomb on earth became utterly powerless. And then Jesus stepped out, not in haste, not in spectacle, but in victory. Creation recognized its creator. Plants bent, the earth stilled, death itself retreated. The first person to encounter the risen Christ was not a priest, a ruler, or an apostle. It was Mary Magdalene. She came to the tomb expecting to anoint a corpse. Instead, she found absence. The stone was moved, the body gone. She wept, assuming the worst, until a voice spoke her name. Mary. One word, one recognition. The sound of her name on his lips shattered despair forever. She reached for him, but he gently stopped her. Do not cling to me. Go and tell my brothers. The resurrection was no longer a secret. Jesus did not return to heaven immediately. For 40 days, he appeared, unexpectedly, quietly, personally, to grieving disciples on the road to Emmaus. He walked beside them, explaining scripture, breaking bread, revealing himself only when their hearts were ready. To fearful apostles hiding behind locked doors, he appeared without opening a door and spoke the words they needed most. Peace be with you. To Thomas, who demanded proof, he offered his wounds. Touch and believe. Thomas fell to his knees. My Lord and my God. These encounters were not displays of power. They were acts of restoration. Jesus was not simply alive again. He was healing trust. On a mountain in Galilee, Jesus spoke his final words. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Then he ascended, not disappearing, but being received into glory. 10 days later, fire descended again, not to destroy, but to empower. At Pentecost, the Holy Spirit filled ordinary men and women with extraordinary courage. Languages erupted, fear vanished, the church was born. What began in a tomb now moved into the streets. The resurrection is not merely a miracle from the past. It is a declaration about reality itself. If Jesus entered death and returned victorious, then death does not have the final word. If he descended into darkness, then no darkness is unreachable. And if he rose, then hope is not naive, it is reasonable. Mel Gibson once said, "The resurrection is not just an event, it's the turning point of the cosmos." He is right, because everything changed and nothing has ever been the same.